Young viewers, welcome back to the Global Strategic and Defense News. In today's Candid conversation, we are going to talk of a very important topic which we have been hearing for the last many years, especially in the last 2, 3 years. That is India-Africa relations. Because today, Africa has become very important as an entity, as a continent. We're seeing a lot of geopolitical games happening there, a lot of economic investment there. So it is very important to understand the India-Africa relations. And to discuss this very important and critical issue are three eminent personalities who are experts in the Africa-India relations. And they are Anushka Srivastava, who's a research scholar in the Department of African Studies in the University of Delhi. Then we have Saurabh Sharma, who's a senior research fellow in the Department of African Studies. And we have Divya Kunwar, who's a PhD research scholar in the Department of African Studies. So first of all, my heartiest welcome to Anushka, Saurabh, and Divya to the Global Strategic and Defense News.
Thank you so much, sir, for having us.
Welcome. So my first question is to Anushka. Anushka, can you please explain the historical and the current relations between India and Africa?
Thank you so much, sir, for giving this opportunity to discuss India-Africa relations. And as many of us have been hearing in the news that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has also stated that Africa is in focus. And when we think about India and Africa today, these two vibrant and rising regions, their relationship is much older, much deeper, and much more human than formal treaties than capture. Speaking from a historical point of view, as my background is also history, it is a bond that is carried by the winds of Indian Ocean, stitched together by sailors, merchants, soldiers, poets, and dreamers. Long before the British or the Portuguese came to India, African traders crossed the Indian Ocean carrying gold, ivory, and stories to India's western shores. In ports like Bharuch, Khambat, and Calicut, Africans were not strangers, they were honored guests. Indian merchants too journeyed to East Africa, to the Swahili coast, to Mozambique, to Zanzibar, bringing cotton, spices, and other goods to find their way into African homes. The ports of the Swahili coast, Mombasa, Kilwa, Zanzibar, served as vibrant nodes in this Afro-Indian oceanic network. These were not only spaces of commerce, but also of cultural fusion, where Indian and African traditions mingled in cuisine, language, music, and daily life. In these interactions, there was an exchange of ideas, there was survival and human connection. People felt connected, languages were borrowed from each other, food recipes merged, and communities grew. Even today, you can hear the echoes of Gujarati words in the markets of Kenya and Tanzania. As centuries passed by, from the medieval period onwards, Africans arrived on Indian shores not just as traders but also as soldiers, sailors, and slaves under various regional powers. However, many transcended this limitation imposed upon them and rose to power as they occupied major positions in India. Throughout India's history, Africans have played an important yet often overlooked role, especially as rulers and military leaders. The most prominent among these was Malik Ambar, an Ethiopian who was brought to India as a slave but rose to become the powerful prime minister of the Ahmednagar Sultanate in the Deccan. His military genius and administrative skills allowed him to resist Mughal advances in the region and even establish the city of Aurangabad. Jamaluddin Yaqut, another notable African figure, he served under Razia Sultan, the only female ruler of the Delhi Sultanate, as a close advisor and military leader. The Siddhi dynasty of Janjira, which was established in 1618, provides another significant example of African influence in India. The Siddhis were of African descent and built a fortified island state off the coast of Maharashtra, maintaining their independence against powerful forces like the Mughals and Portuguese. Another important figure was Siddhi Masood, who governed in Andhra Pradesh under the Bijapur Sultanate. His governance and fortifications left a lasting imprint on the region. So, why I'm talking about them is that because legacies of these African rulers stand as powerful examples of resilience, cultural integration, and social mobility that was enriching to India's diverse historical fabric. The Siddhis, the communities of Indian African descent, who settled in Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Goa, and Hyderabad, continue to maintain distinct cultural identities while integrating into a larger Indian social fabric. The history reflects a long standing African presence in India. The modern era brought new challenges but also new solidarities. In the 20th century, as India struggled against the British colonial rule, Africans too were rising against their own oppressors. Indian leaders like Mahatma Gandhi, who had lived in South Africa, realized that the struggle for freedom in one land was deeply connected to the struggle in other. Gandhi's fight against racial discrimination in South Africa was not just a footnote, it was a starting point for a global awakening. Post independence, India's first Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, extended a hand of friendship to African nations, believing that the newly freed countries must work together in dignity. It was Nehru who had a vision of establishing a think tank to study Africa and India Africa relations that in the year of 1955, the Department of African Studies at the University of Delhi was established. This was a relationship of respect, of shared vision, and shared dreams. When we talk of the current relations between India and Africa, I see the significance of Africa for India and India for Africa as it is a partnership for the future. Intellectually speaking, India Africa relations can be understood through the lens of South South cooperation, which was also highlighted in the historic Bandung Conference of 1955. This paradigm prioritizes the idea of equitable partnerships between developing nations that do not replicate the exploitative dynamics of North South relations. At a deeper philosophical level, the relationship between India and Africa is more than just transactional. It is a profound engagement that seeks to redefine the global order by advocating for fairer representation, multilateralism, and global justice. It represents a shared commitment to sovereignty, socio-economic development, and cultural resurgence, while also offering a progressive model for collaboration that challenges the traditional geopolitical narratives. Both India and Africa stand at the threshold of redefining their global roles and share vision. So, I would say that the current scenario of India Africa relations is an intellectually rich and philosophically grounded alliance. India Africa historical relations are rooted in centuries, and today this historic partnership continues to evolve through economic collaboration, a shared commitment to creating a more equitable global order. Thank you so much, sir.
Well, Anushka, that was very insightful and it was very interesting also at the same time to, know so many things which, frankly, I wasn't aware, and especially the part where, way back in 55, the Department of African Studies was opened under the, vision of the then Prime Minister Nehru. So thank you for very interesting points that you have put out. My next question to you is Saurabh. Saurabh, India was instrumental in getting the African Union as one of the members of the G20 in the 2023 G20 summit, which was hosted in New Delhi. So, what do you feel? Did India gain anything by that move?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you for having me, and thank you for this question because this is a really important question. Given that this year we have African country hosting the G20 celebration. So, what we have achieved in these 2 years, and what India has achieved per se by doing this. But I do not see India trying to include African Union in the G20 as a very surprising move or very surprising initiative, because if you see the trace the history of India-Africa relations, this seems to be in continuation of all the efforts that have been put in by different leaders of India and Africa. So, like Africa, Anushka has given us a very wonderful depiction of the historical relations of India-Africa relations. But even after independence, we see there's a long history of connections. Just now, we had celebrated the 70 years of Bandung Conference, and we have NAM, then we have India supporting different countries in their decolonization struggle, freedom struggle. Even after independence, India supporting them in technical assistance, education, in all these initiatives. India, as a matter of fact, was the first country to ostracize South Africa's apartheid regime and speak in its mind. So, in that sense, India's association with Africa and India's standing for Africa was something not new, and it is in continuation of that effort that India took the chance took the opportunity of being the host country for G20 to include African Union for that as a member of G20. But let us also break down to set the context of what African Union inclusion in G20 means for the world and India. African Union has 55 countries, so it means G20, which claims to be the steering committee of global economy, and still Africa barely had a seat because you had only participation from South Africa. So you have only one country representing entire Africa, and you are almost negating or neglecting the identity of those 54 countries of Africa. So that is obviously not representing the entire global economy. And if you want to grow at a pace, and if you want to talk economy, you have to talk about Africa, because just looking at the numbers, we know that African economies are doing much better than the global economic development average. So all the developing countries, whether in Europe or America, they are seeing recession or stagnation. But African economy and all the experts believe that this century is going to be of Afro-Asian. Earlier we used to say that this would be Asian century, but now we say that this is going to be an Afro-Asian century. And so Africa has to be made part of all the initiatives, all the groupings, to make those initiatives relevant. Otherwise, these initiatives, these groupings, they will lose their own relevance. So India saw this gap, and during its G20 presidency, India made sure that African Union was made part of the permanent member of that G20 summit. But why did India push for it is also a question, and that will bring me to my conclusion of what India has achieved. One is obviously that moral leadership, the moral compass that India has been putting, and the idea of positioning itself as the voice of the South, because just before hosting the G20 summit, India also hosted in 2023 only Voice of the Global South Summit, where the voices from the Global South, the countries who do not get the mic at the global podiums, they were invited to speak at these summits. And so India has been continuously putting efforts to provide podium, provide space to these countries. So it provides India moral leadership in calling out or being the voice for the Global South. And then there's also a strategic point involved in this, because India, as it claims to be, or as it wants to assert itself with the strong economy and strength and strong military that it has, there's a geopolitical contestation going around, at least in the Southwest Indian Ocean, with China. And China, with the deep pockets, China is investing hugely in Africa. So India does not have the capability to match China's capability in terms of its economic might, because China is almost five times bigger than India in terms of economy. So by acts like these, India builds that confidence, builds that cooperation with Africa, and it was very much well received in the African media, African countries. They all praised that India has come out to be our true friend. And this is what, when India gets a position, India gets an opportunity to assert itself, India will only for Indian problems, Indian concerns, but India will also speak for the world, for the marginalized, for Africa, and for those who have been left behind. So in that sense, that also is a smart move. And then this is part of the larger Indian foreign policy doctrine, that we want the global system, global platforms to be more representative, whether it is United Nations Security Council, whether it is the working of World Bank, IMF. So all these global institutions, they need to be restructured to recalibrate, to navigate the emerging realities of the modern world, and where this is no longer a world dominated by a single superpower. Now, how do we see, and what has changed for India after this? One thing, obviously, that I've talked about also in my remarks, that is gaining credibility. That if India becomes powerful, it will become powerful, but it will also make others powerful. That's one trait of a leadership, that if you get the leadership position, you do not stand alone, you also make your compatriots, your friends rise with you. So that gives India the credibility to be the voice of the global South. Then it also opens up opportunities for the economic cooperation because Africa, we all know Africa is rich in minerals, gas, maritime resources, and so there are so many areas where India and Africa can collaborate in and economically in defense cooperation. So it also opens up the possibility of those cooperation and also strategic depth because by this act uh, you do ensure you do create goodwill with 55 countries. So that plays a good role, a major role whenever there is a voting on international forums like United Nations and all. So these points makes India's claim very pragmatic and idealistic, and there's this balance of pragmatism and and idealism of India's foreign policy. And in a bigger sense, this move is also forcing change elsewhere because this, I think, this has punched a hole in the old way of running global institutions, and the world has to realize that you can't talk about global problems without global representation. So for this. Uh, for India, I think this success also boosts its uh, pitch for a permanent position at the UNSC, and also it showcases that India's demand is not about India only. If India becomes powerful, it will make other countries powerful. So that has made a real difference, I think, and that will not stop because we do still have many organizations which are still very much Eurocentric. We need to uh, recalibrate these institutions, and we have opened up the possibilities of doing this. And with all this country coming together, that gives us hope, and we are all are optimistic that India-Africa relations can build a new era of transformation and digital on a global order, where every country gets represented, every voice gets heard.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. I think it was a very, good move, both from the strategic point of view and from the humanity point of view, that India initiated the case for the inclusion of the African Union as a member of G20. Well, like it is taught in our scriptures and our holy scriptures in India, that as you grow up in life, you should also take people along with you. Same goes with nations. As nations grow powerful, when they take the weaker nations along with them, it does make a lot of difference. So very well brought out. Thank you so much, Saurabh. Divya, my last question to you of the show is that how do you visualize the India-Africa relations evolving in the next 2 decades?
Okay, so thank you so much for having me. Uh, if I have to look for the question of how we can visualize India-Africa relation in the coming decades, I can say that if I have to sum it up in one line, that would be that Africa and India are going to move forward from just being friends from distance to becoming partners in building a future together. So this isn't just a visual thinking. We have already started making this happen. For example, if we can take if we look at how right now, if we look at in the terms of the young population, youth population, Africa is right now today, Africa is have more than 60% of African right now are under the age of 25, and by 2050, 1 out of 4 people in the world will be African. Simultaneously, if we look at India, India is now world's most populous country, and also one of the fastest growing economy with large number of youth population in its overall population. So, and just opposite to that, if we look at the population of Europe, China, and even Japan, we will see that India and Africa have a very young population, dynamic population, but Europe, China, and Japan, they have an aging population. uh, Plus we also have this point where we can see that India supported African decolonization movement way before today, when there was a point about trained African leaders, and how even scholarships were provided. And also that Anushka have mentioned about Mahatma Gandhi, that how his Africa was his practice point before the whole movement which came to India for the independence of India. So we have a long connection through history. uh, if I have to point out some major areas where we can see a shift in the relationship, and when where we can see the evolving nature of this relationship, I would say that earlier there was this one point where we can see how the relationship was confined to from government to government. Now it's shifting towards people to people. So it's not about how just the leaders are signing the agreements anymore. You are seeing the Indian entrepreneurs, universities, tech expert all moving towards Africa, and how Africans are coming to India for education, healthcare, business. For example, if we look at today, there are more than 25,000 African students who are studying in the Indian universities, and we do expect this number to grow even more. Secondly, I would say that we have shifted from the economy towards investment economy, where earlier India mostly gave developmental aid to Africa. Now we are moving towards investments. So there are private Indian companies that are buying farms in Mozambique, setting up tech farms in Kenya, and there are big pharma hubs in Nigeria. For example, India's pharma industry, which is famously called the pharmacy of the world, already supplies around one third of Africa's medicine. So it's such a big number, and we are seeing a very high growth in this number as well in terms of pharma. The third point, the shift we can see that is from how we are being shifted from a passive friendship towards a strategic alignment. Africa is crucial for India in terms of food security, energy security. For example, that Saurav already mentioned about the critical minerals. For example, Africa is among the not among the it is actually the highest exporter in terms of cobalt and lithium, and we do need that. Everybody needs that, and also in terms of maritime security. So we are seeing a shift towards a strategic alignment with Africa, and now India is realizing that how in the Indian Ocean, this new relation, this ancient relationship will definitely help in long term, and it will definitely foster the South-South cooperation. Uh, Also, if we look at in terms of defense agreement as well, as if somebody studies how the country have been working together, Africa and India have been working together in terms of defense agreement, we will see that countries like Mauritius, Seychelles, and Kenya, we are having a security cooperation from with them for a very long time right now. For example, in 2021, if somebody of you recall that, when the Indian cargo ship was hijacked by the pirates in the coast of Somalia, it was the African Union naval forces, and which was partially trained by the Indian help, that actually helped to secure the whole rescue operation. These silent collaborations are also there, and can be seen in the future more. And if I have to look at some non-traditional areas where the Indian economy, India is working towards with Africa, there are specific sectors. For example, if we look at the digital economy, you know that India is one of the uh, best successful cases of digital public infrastructure, where systems like Aadhaar ID system, UPI payment system is already being utilized as a very at a very large scale. And now this technology is being exported to Africa as well. Africa is also, because of the help of India, and there are a lot of cooperation. Even in the BRICS project, there have been joint collaboration between India and Africa about working towards a more digitalized public infrastructure, and how it can also be used in healthcare and affordable technology for Africa. For example, if we look at Rwanda Smart Africa project, which has openly modeled parts of visions of India's digital success. So there are some similarities between all those projects, and obviously India has been an inspiration and help for it. Secondly, I would say in the terms of new streams, green energy is there. As we know, India and African countries like Kenya, Morocco, South Africa are players of the International Solar Alliance, and International Solar Alliance is a brainchild of India. We also expect to see that there will be more joint solar parks, green hydrogen projects, and climate resilient partnership over the next coming decades. Thirdly, I would say about healthcare and pharmaceuticals. Healthcare and pharmaceuticals, as we know, during the time of COVID, India sent millions of vaccine doses to Africa, where the Europe was not helping Africa, not just under the COVAX, but directly, and of course free of charges. So this actually built a good, enormous level of goodwill between both the centers, both the areas. And we do wish to see in the next 2 decades that there will be more likely Indian pharmaceutical companies setting up at full scale manufacturing hubs in Africa. Obviously, there in any growth there are some challenges. So we can talk about how definitely there is challenge by the Chinese investment in Africa right now because of the infrastructural investment, and obviously they also face the challenges of Chinese debt trap because of that. There are security challenges because as we know, terrorism in the western part of Africa, piracy, political instability, all these factors do affect the relationship between Indian investments, Indian relation with African nation. Thirdly, there are definitely some issues of visa and migration tension because sometimes African students in India do face the problem of racism and violence, and vice versa happens in Africa. These are some of the ugly incidents that can actually damage the relationship, but India is actually working towards it. So if India wants a deeper relationship, we do have to tackle these problems head on and not pretend that they do not exist anymore. So to conclude, I would say that by 2045, we can see India-Africa relation evolving into something much more deeper than we have today. India will be among the top three investors in Africa, especially in terms of green energy, fintech, education, and health. And Africa will be India's second largest trade partner after ASEAN. We have already seen the growth in that terms, and obviously in terms of the strategic cooperation, there will be definitely a growth, and not just in terms of the Indian Navy in the African water, but there are joint exercises going on, and there will be defense training and disaster response teams, and more investment and evolving in this areas as well. So India Africa relations are moving towards not it's not only about how we shared an anti-colonial past with each other. Now we are moving towards building a shared digital, green, and youthful future. The most exciting part about all this is this relationship is not anymore dominated by aid or dependency on each other. It's more about like a partnership of equals. If we get it right, in the next 2 decades we can see that could see India and Africa shaping the 21st century together, not from sidelines, but actually being the center of the world politics. And in right now in this multipolar world, maybe we can see a shift in the multipole towards the South-South cooperation. So that is what I wanted to add. Thank you.
Well, Divya, you made very great points, and I totally agree with you. The way the India-Africa relations have been till now, and they'll, rise exponentially in the 2 decades ahead and the times beyond that, because Africa really is now fully convinced. It was convinced earlier also, but now also it is fully convinced that yes, India is a true and trusted friend. Thank you for the good points made. Well, viewers, here we come to the end of the this episode of the Candid Conversation. I'm sure that you would have learned a lot. I personally learned a lot. It was very great listening to these three eminent, personalities who gave out such great points. It shows the depth of the research and the depth of the studies and the books they read, because then only one can give so many good points. So it has been really phenomenal hearing each one of them. Viewers, I would request you that like the program, forward the program, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and most important, give your comments, because your comments help me, decide the future path that I would like the GSN to take. And thank you so much, Anushka, Saurabh, and Divya, for the great points made by each one of you. It was really phenomenal listening to each one of you. I wish I had more time, but then time is always a constraint in today's world. Thank you so much for sparing your valuable time and coming on the Global Strategic and Defense News.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you for having us.